Welcome everyone to this GreenWeek session on chemicals, Farewell PFAS, calling time on the forever chemicals. PFAS, there are thousands of them. They are, according to the European Chemical Agency, they are the per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances. They are fluorinated chemicals that resist degradation, That's why we call them forever chemicals. They contaminate groundwater, surface water, and soil. The EU is restricting the manufacture and use of some PFAS under the REACH program. What are these PFAS? What do? They repel oil, water, stains, heat. They're used in electronics, in nonstick cookware, in water and stain-resistant clothing, in cosmetics, firefighting foam, pesticides, pharmaceuticals, refrigerants, windmills, cars. The list is endless. And in this green transition, how much should we restrict it? How much should we ban some of those products? How much should we apply what's called the precautionary principle to ban it before we know fully how dangerous it is? How do we replace them? That's why we have talking with us during this panel for the next hour, regulators, industry, retailers, on how we're dealing with this. What do we do about it? Technical tips, because I'd like all of you watching to get involved as much as you can. Questions, send them to the Slido, and they will be passed on to me. Keep in mind the hashtag EU GreenWeek, hashtag EU GreenWeek, to pass on any good sound bites that you hear, any comments you'd like to make, to cast it wider. Also hashtag PFAS, P-F-A-S. So before we get to our first guest, I'd like to show you a clip, a trailer from a recent film called Dark Waters. It's about the DuPont company manufacturing with PFAS in North Carolina, starring Mark Ruffalo, Anne Hathaway, Tim Robbins. Have a look at that.
I defend chemical companies.
Well, now you can defend me.
How many did you lose?
190.
190 cows.
You tell me nothing's wrong here.
It's a small matter for a family friend. Help a guy who needs it.
The farmer or you? That's chemicals, I'm telling you.
I'm seeing documents I don't understand.
They're hiding something. That chemical.
What if you drank it? Drank it? It's like saying, what if I swallowed a tire?
What if whatever's killing those cows is in the drinking water?
Okay, so that is just a trailer from the movie. It's what we want to talk about today for the next hour. What about PFAS? What do we do about it? How it's so important in so many products that we make today, that we use every day. Ksenia Trier, the European Environmental Agency. Let me ask you about this issue. How worried should we be about PFAS?
Well, I think we should be rather worried because we have multiple lines of evidence of their harm. It's not just one compound, but it's very many compounds, as you just said. And what they have in common is that they are all either persistent in themselves or they form persistent degradation products. And
persistent
what that means
is a term, but that means that it doesn't go away.
Exactly. So that means that once it's out there, it will accumulate either in our bodies or in the environment. And that means that it may be difficult in the future to find clean water, clean air, clean soil, clean products, but also that these chemicals accumulate to a level where they cause harm. And the harm can be different, but what we know is that they're especially worrisome for the development of children. Their immune systems get impaired, their fertility gets impaired. They also may cause testicular cancer, high cholesterol, etc. So the list is very long because it's very many different compounds, but what they have in common is that they're more likely to be harmful and not. They're very difficult to get out from water, etc. once they're in there. So it's also very costly to remove. And
so they're there, but how dangerous are they? I mean, there is the argument that they're at such low levels, really, that it's not really dangerous now.
Well, the thing is that these chemicals, according to the European Food Safety Authority, are really rather toxic at very low levels. We have only investigated a few of them, of the thousands that you mentioned, only about like 4 or 5, 10 PFAS are very well studied, but they are very toxic and cause levels. And this has been demonstrated both in animals, but also in people in big epidemiological studies. And it's not just on the human health they can cause harm, it's also on the environment. For instance, a group of the PFAS are also the fluorinated refrigerants, and they accumulate in the atmosphere and may cause global warming. And the thing is that it's not just about whether they're harmful once we use it, it's also in the whole production. And what we just saw here in the clip was actually the production of some fluoropolymers, that where the fluoropolymer itself was perhaps was not what was causing the harm. It was actually some of the ingredients used to make that polymer. So we have to think not just of the use phase, but the whole life cycle.
Okay, and can you, you have a bit of show and tell. Can you do that briefly?
Yeah, well, I think, as you said, there are many different uses. Like some of them are like jackets, sports jackets.
Because that repels water.
It repels water and dirt. So it's very convenient to have one. I mean, I can have a jacket that works, but this is nice because it's nice to have because it doesn't get dirty as much.
Yeah. I'd have a hard time giving that up, but anyway, go ahead.
Then we also have the Teflon frying pans, where you have a coating on it. Again, you may fry your food in other ways, but this is also convenient because it repels. Yeah. Then I have something here like muffin forms, but it could also be paper and board for microwave popcorns. It could be for your French fries, etc. Yeah. Or the very nice batteries, lithium batteries here, and other kinds of electronics. Your telephone, etc. might have polymers in them that are made with PFAS.
Okay, right. So I want to get back to you, but let me move on to Frauke Avebeck at the German Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. Frauke, where do we stand on regulation on banning PFAS from the market via the EU law? I mean, how far do we go on that?
Yes, thanks, Chris, for that question. We have already banned a few PFAS, for example, the perfluoroalkyl acids and the precursors under REACH. We are also have a restriction in place for longer chain perfluoroalkylic acids, like the C10 to C14, so that's the carbon chain length. And we are currently working on restricting the perfluorohexanoic acids and the precursors.
Okay,
and
most of us are not chemists, but what are those used in usually? What have they been used in?
They are, for example, used in firefighting foams, but also in the products Xenia just showed you. So that's a high variety of different uses. And this has all been just some work on pieces. And we are all aware, as Xenia also pointed out, that there are a lot more PFAS around, and they are also going into the environment. And that's why we, together with 4 other member states, are currently working on a universal PFAS restriction. So all PFAS and all users, that's the starting point for our restriction, which we are currently working on. And then we have to see if there are specific uses or specific PFAS that warrant a derogation because they have a very important use for society.
Okay. Now, I talked to you about this ahead of time, and we talked about the process, and I don't want to get too heavy in the weeds here on that, but the bottom line was that even if you proceed with this effort to regulate, it's going to take several years, right? Not until 2024, 25. Why does it take so long without going too deeply into the details?
Yeah, it's a very sophisticated process involving different committees, scientific committees at ECHA, at the European Chemicals Agency, who are going to evaluate the proposal we are going to hand in. And this is the way the regulatory process is designed, that the proposal is assessed by scientists, and then an opinion is provided to the legislators, to the policymakers, who will then decide on the proposal. And this, the whole process also still involves a public consultation, where also the stakeholders that will be affected by the reg can decision has to be taken.
Yeah, I guess it can't be too fast. You have to have all different kinds of input. Our apologies for that signal connection, a little bit chopping up there, but we got the point there. Let's move on to what do we do about it from, say, a drinking water standpoint. Oliver Löbel, Secretary General of EUREAU, EUREAU, like Eurowater. Can we remove, Oliver? And you represent the drinking water industry, the industry that provides drinking water, right? How much can we remove PFAS from our drinking water, and what are the challenges?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. First of all, I think PFAS should never find their way into water resources in the first place. So once they are there, I think it's already too late, and it puts both drinking water and wastewater operators in a very difficult situation. We now have thresholds under the Drinking Water Directive, so we will have to respect them in the future. And what we see today is that there are certain technologies that can tackle PFAS, but we have to say most of our customers generally want a natural product, a safe and an affordable product, which means more than 60 or about 60% of the water we currently supply is not treated or only undergoes very conventional, simple treatment like filtration, etc. Most of the advanced technologies cannot remove PFAS.
So it is possible, but it's just extremely expensive.
You have three technologies that could help, like activated carbon use. You have anion exchange, or which is, I think, most advanced, the reverse osmosis. But this is a technology which is extremely resource and energy intensive, 5 times more expensive than conventional drinking water treatment. So it will increase, of course, costs for consumers. And it also increases water use by 15% because you have to flush. So you increase water use just to have, at the end of the day, the same quantity of PFAS-free water.
Right. So your argument is that's not feasible. What we have to do is just stop the production.
I mean, from a drinking water production point of view, in practice, it's not feasible. The average size of our members is 7 or 8 employees. Many of them employ only 2 to 3 employees. They are simply not in a position, neither financially nor technically, to run such complex systems. And I think people would also not want such an artificial product. If you use reverse osmosis, we remove all minerals, also those that should stay in the water, which means we have to remineralize the water after treatment artificially. So it's a completely artificial product. So our message is very clear. PFAS do not belong in water resources and should be kept out of them.
So are you saying that this glass of water has PFAS in it? How certain is that?
It depends on the source. I mean, we have some data. Many sources, drinking water sources in Europe, are still PFAS-free, but in other areas, both in surface water and groundwaters, we find PFAS at very low concentrations, locally also at higher concentrations. And you have mentioned, I think, some cases in the invitation where there have been real cases of pollution, contamination of drinking water resources, usually through point sources, which means production sites or fire extinguishing foam.
Okay, let's keep those questions coming in. They're starting to collect via Slido. So send in your questions before we'll get to them after I get through all of our speakers. Our next speaker is Marlene Teller-Bloom. You are with Co-op Denmark. That is a supermarket chain, and the retailer's experience in replacing PFAS in their shops. Can you give us a few examples of that, Marlene?
Yes, we started back in 2014. Exactly, discussing with Senior Trier and her department in Denmark and another expert and scientist where we were informed about this very concern about those chemicals. And we realized that there was a problem here, and we realized that it would take several years before the legislation would cover the problem. So we started to look into our assortment where we did find the use of PFAS. And it was in the beginning also focused from Senior Trier and her staff that it was a food contacting materials made from paper and paperboard. So this was our first focus, to phase out PFAS from paper and food packaging material. So we started up in 2014 with a ban for all our private labels. We have approximately 4,000 products in private label. And with support from Senior and other scientists and authorities, we did manage to set up a ban and also try to explain our suppliers what they had to look for. Some of them even didn't know that they were using the PFAS in that time. It was quite early.
So how willing were your suppliers to play ball and to replace the use of PFAS?
We had to convince them quite much, because they didn't know exactly about the problem, and it was a very thin coating. It was very low amount of PFAS in the coating, so they weren't aware about the risk for the environment and also for the human health. So we start discussing and identify high risk products, and then we start to phase out. And then we, after approximately 8 months, we ended up with one product left. It was a microwave popcorn. If you open the word file that I have put into the link, you can see our packaging for a microwave popcorn. In the bottom, it said without fluorinated chemicals in the packaging. So in 2015, we had to remove it from our shelves completely. We didn't sell it for 6 months because we couldn't find any supplier in the world produce microwave popcorn packaging without PFAS. And we know it was heat, it was fat, and PFAS, that was not a good combination. But then finally a supplier find a solution, and then the popcorn was back on our shelves in 2016.
But did some of this translate into higher prices by replacing products? And were your consumers willing to pay the extra price if there was?
It has been a minor impact on the prices, because we have negotiated supplier by supplier, and we have good Nordic producer of paper and paperboard. So we looked into to use a higher quality for the paper, so there was no need for PFAS to make the surface water repelling, fat repellent. And then we were also helped about the Nordic Swan. This is a Nordic eco-labeling. They have already a ban for PFAS for some years. So the supplier has looked into this. They want to use this logo. It's very popular in the Nordic countries. So we had suppliers found a good solution for us. So then the ball started rolling, and then it was easier for us to also to put suppliers together. Say, we have found a solution, contact this paper supplier. They can probably help you.
Okay, so this is all about the green transition, and you got an early start there. That's like 7 years ago, and before regulations got tighter. But now let's turn to industry and ask about how difficult is it to make that green transition and to get away from PFAS. Joining us is Nicolas Rodin. You are Director of Fluoropolymer Products Group in Plastics Europe. That represents the plastics industry in Europe. Nicolas, how much can we replace PFAS? I think you need to turn on your mic. Are you with us?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, sure.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, first of all, I want to say that obviously yourself, Chris, and our colleagues on the panel use the term PFAS as a very generic way. And we have to acknowledge that obviously PFAS is a large universe of different substances. And these substances can be grouped in different subgroups who have different chemical, physical, environmental property. And even our colleague for the European Environmental Bureau in June 2020 point out that obviously fluoropolymer, the product I'm representing, are low concern for human health and environment. And actually, we currently are developing a program looking at the fluoropolymer through the criteria developed by the OECD on polymer of low concern. And my colleagues know also that this criteria is based on 30 different criteria. So what I want to say, it's risk or persistency doesn't mean necessary risk. You have to assess different PFAS. And so when you're looking at, I will say, alternative, was obviously the big word.
Exactly.
Let's don't put the elephant in the room. So we have persistency. I already discussed that. We have alternative. So, I mean, for the product I'm representing and we're manufacturing, obviously they have a irreplaceable property. Such they are non-sticky, resistant to corrosion, and used on extreme weather. So obviously, Xenia showed us a nice battery. Yes, of course, there is in some battery. And if you want to develop electric vehicle, you need fluoropolymer in the electric battery. Right. If you want to use hydrogen technology, well, fluoropolymer is also needed in the membrane, which enable this transformation of hydrogen to electricity.
So you're saying to make this green transition we're talking about, we need PFAS to some degree.
Well, if actually I will say, not being provocative, but fluoropolymer at least is enabling digitalization and the Green Deal. As I said, with renewables, we are also used in high voltage interrupter for windmill that you cannot do without.
Switch, you mean?
Yes, switch, yeah. Right. We also on blade, we are also on photovoltaic panels. In aircraft, we minimize the fire hazard. And in automobile sector, obviously, as I said, in terms of battery, electric battery or hydrogen battery, but also in terms of all the performance for the engine and the energy efficiency. And the goal also is to tackle climate change. So,
but what is it? But let me ask you though, Nicolas, is how can't industry get a little bit more on the ball to innovate and to find other ways to do this so they can replace PFAS?
Well, the question, Chris, again, it's what I said at the beginning. When I heard my colleague in the panel, the question is, we have to be phasing out or rid of PFAS, all the PFAS. I heard a universal phasing out. And just I'm saying is risk is not because of persistency. If you substance, especially the fluoropolymer, are a low concern for human health and a low concern for the environment and are irreplaceable, actually you have to know that fluoropolymer are extremely expensive and they use in articles of very high technology, high value. So if our end user or customer will be rid of us, they will be very happy to do so, to be frank, because we are very expensive. So sometimes it's a little volume of PFAS who's needed. For example, if you're taking a car, it's around 1 ton, and you have no more than 500 grams of fluoropolymer in the car. In different parts of the car, we're helping to tackle some of these objectives. So we have to be careful what we said. So it's not a question we don't innovate it. Yeah. It's a question what you're looking at when you're talking about PFAS and when you're talking about risk.
And how do you get rid of it? You can't recycle it because it's persistent, right? Because it's so durable. It's a forever chemical. So the only way to do it is burn it, right?
So I like also the way it's forever chemical. Yes, it's persistent. It's the beauty of the fluoropolymer, at least.
Well, they made it.
And so they are doing helping the life, expanding the lifespan of the products. And therefore, if you look, first of all, you have to know that fluoropolymer who are waste, they are not putting in a municipal waste. You know, a lot of them are going through dedicated stream. And this dedicated stream, obviously, for example, for cars or for chemicals. And this dedicated stream has been documented and disposed in in an orderly way. It's true that some fluoropolymer, unfortunately still in a majority, is going to incineration. So the question that my colleague in the panel can ask me is it safe? And so we are working also on that. We have a project, and we have also, we saw some literature already saying, yes, if you incinerate in the normal condition, all the PFAS will be, do not exist anymore, will be burned. And we just want to confirm that with a study. We are starting looking at all the literature, and we will see, maybe we will see in which condition. And also, yes, for some fluoropolymer also, you can grade them, you can reuse them, you can reprocess them. Not enough, probably for the time being, and we need to work with all the value chain on that. That for sure.
Okay, I have so many questions, and I have, about 15 minutes here left. So let's try to get to as many as we can and try to keep the answers as brief as possible so we can get to all of them. Here's the first one. Why is the European Commission working so slowly with laws to get a clean environment? The lady who founded Endecocide has already died from cancer. Who can I ask about that? Ksenia, maybe? Ksenia, Frauke?
I think this should be Frauke because we don't do regulations. So Frauke, I think it's over to you.
Okay, Frauke, I know you're not the European Commission. You are,
Exactly.
you're a member state. You're the German ministry regarding it. But why does it take so long? And you already sort of explained that, but
Yeah,
how do you speed it up?
I tried to explain it, but maybe to add to my previous intervention, the way REACH is designed is that restrictions are based on a risk. So what we as authorities, when we want to regulate substance, need to do is to prove that there is a risk. And when REACH started out, the requirements for restrictions for member states to propose them were quite high, and we also had to struggle with the high requirements that we needed to prove that there is a risk.
To prove, okay,
So,
then how come? Okay, that's the argument. Can I pitch it back to Ksenia? Then isn't it up to ECHA, the chemical agency, to prove that there's a risk, that there's a bigger risk?
Well, I would say part of the reason that we have this issue with PFAS is that there are so many uses. We have so little information about which chemicals are used in which products. And really, it's industry that should provide these information to various institutions. In the case of fluoropolymers, it's partly because they are not supposed to be, they're not covered by REACH at the time being. And I just wanted to say that as a comment to what Nicholas said before, that they are polymers of low concern. Well, perhaps if you only look at the use phase, if they were so polymers of low concern, you wouldn't have the cases like we saw in dark waters. We see many of the cases in Europe also where the contamination happens around the production sites of fluoropolymer plants. So I would say the issue about why is regulation slow is that the current system requires a lot of information before you can take action. And that is exactly why this restriction is saying, well, perhaps if we know that PFAS are more likely to be harmful than not, that we'd use the precautionary principles exactly to speed up regulation.
Okay, all right. It's tricky. It's tricky. I guess it's up to researchers to find more evidence, I suppose. And here's another question. The exceptions for PFAS in personal protective clothing, like the one you held up, are very important until there are equivalent alternatives. What can Ksenia or Malina maybe say about this? This is about professional protective clothing. That's a little bit different. Some professional protective clothing. Let me pitch that to Malina.
Thank you. We have replaced the PFAS in technical outerwear for children and also rainwear for adults and ski wear. And we haven't received any complaints about this. So for skiers and for children being outside maybe many hours a day, and it's pretty rainy in Denmark in the season, it seems to fulfill their expectation for a proper quality.
But can you talk about professional clothing that's specially made for certain kinds of occupations, or
it could be for fire workers. I think there might be an issue here. I'm not quite sure about the alternative for those kind of very technical protection gear. I'm not quite sure how this is solved, but for me and probably many of you that are not professional but you like to be outside and also active, I think the alternatives today are really good.
Okay. Next question. How would it be possible to apply the polluter pays principle in order to have industry pay for drinking water cleaning and remediation costs? Of course, that's a question to Oliver.
This is, of course, one of the key questions. So we have the polluter pays principle enshrined in the treaty in Article 191. So it is something that should happen. And today, all the additional costs that fall upon drinking water suppliers are not internalized in the cost for PFAS. So they fall on the water consumer. So today, the polluter pays principle is replaced by the water consumer pays principle, which is, of course, not correct. For point sources, I think it's relatively easy. So you know where the pollution comes from. You can point at a given production site, for example, and can say, this is the one that caused the problem. This is the one that should pay. But we have, of course, a lot of diffuse pollution. As you showed, or Xenia showed also, the frying pans, the gear, the outdoor clothes, if this is washed or cleaned, you always remove a bit of these substances. They go through the wastewater treatment plant, end up in the environment, and eventually in drinking water resources. So here we have to turn to the producers also of these products using the substances.
Okay, next question. Measuring fluorine levels in packaging is not sufficient. Do you support zero tolerance of PFAS in compostable materials? Who would want to comment on that? Do you support the zero tolerance? Maybe Frauke? I don't know. Frauke?
I mean, yes, the food contact materials will be covered by our restriction proposal. And I think this is something where consumers are concerned with. And there we think we should get rid of PFAS completely.
Okay, all right. Next question. There is no known alternative to PTFE for production of strong acids. What does the PFAS restriction plan for industrial uses? That's, I guess, either to Frauke or Xenia, right?
Oh, if I may say a bit.
Go ahead.
Well, I think some of the examples we've heard here, the occupational protective clothing and perhaps like industrial production of strong acids, those are some of the more special uses that might be, currently essential because we don't have alternatives. However, the main point is that these PFAS, they are used for so many different uses where there are alternatives. And so by removing the uses there, we will actually remove a lot of the sources of pollution also go into drinking water. And then we might maintain it currently for some of these other uses. But as Malene showed, often alternatives do not exist before you have a regulation that requires to look for it. So I think with this regulation, you will also see that there will be a new search for innovation and new innovation in these products. And I think that's really where we are right now. We just need to start that innovation.
Okay, innovation. Here's another question. Shouldn't regulations focus on the problem, emissions of PFAS into the environment, instead of wasting limited R&D resources to change long life products? What do you think, Xenia?
Sorry, did you ask me?
Yeah, I think so, because you just mentioned that. If anybody else wants to comment too.
Yeah, well, as was said in the previous session on safe and sustainable by design, I mean, it's smarter to avoid a problem than trying to solve it. And actually, this relates to this question of the polluter pays principle, because the idea behind the polluter pays is that you pollute and then you can remediate it, then you can clean it up. But in this case with PFAS, often we cannot clean it up. So even if you pay for it, you haven't solved the problem. And this is why actually controlling the emissions, the most efficient way is to avoid using it. So to that extent, I would agree that this is the most effective way of avoiding pollution.
Okay, all right. Nicola, before I get to you, I know you want to comment on this manufacturing. And this comment in Slido says, like Chris, I would also have a hard time giving up my special clothing used for skiing, sailing, motorbiking. They're great textiles. Nicola, what's your input on this?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, first of all, I'm very pleased that I see that Xenia seems to agree with me that the definition of polymer of low concern, and we probably have a way around that. I talk about the waste, and obviously my colleague talked about the manufacturing and the polymer concept and so on. I mean, the industry obviously already adapt themselves. They provide solution, new technology. As you know, it's on the press. Some of my members decide not to use fluorinated polarization aid for some fluoropolymer. For some other fluoropolymer, when it's not possible yet, the industry is working and doing some research and development on this subject. And the last word is obviously with the mixed is also the control of emission. So companies are responsible companies. I mean, they're looking at their emission, how they were to do it. And again, I understand the question that the stakeholder are asking us. And again, our trade association is working all together to look at that closely in terms of emission and how we can develop a stewardship. So if you want, we understand the concern of our colleagues. So we're looking at the manufacturing phase, we're looking at the use phase, and we're looking at the waste phase. Unfortunately, I don't have all the answer today, because as you know, all this study taking time, but we will have some answer for the fall. I will share that. We will share that openly with the colleagues, and we already have dialogue actually with the 5 member states who are doing the risk restriction.
Okay, now I mean, in the background, I'm thinking precautionary principle, right? And here's a question to you: in the intrinsic safety of fluoropolymers seems to be complex. Every year, new research reveals that they are more toxic. How can you be sure, Nicola? Well,
again, as I said, now we're looking through, we have this criteria defined not by the industry, it's been defined by the OECD, who's looking at 13 different criteria and developing the concept of polymer of low concern, who actually has not developed it for PFAS or fluoropolymer, but for a polymer in general. And right now, some colleagues already did some work, and we're looking, basically, we're going to cover 80 to 90% of the market of fluoropolymer. And we will demonstrate that most of them are polymer of low concern. And if there is gap, we will look at this gap, we'll investigate this gap, and we will close this gap.
Okay, all right. Let's move on, because I have just a few minutes left. I want to move on to Frauke. Question: will fluoropolymers be in the scope of the Registry of Intention? Can you explain that briefly?
What the Registry of Intention is, you mean? Yes, this is just a list on the website of the European Chemicals Agency, where you can see which states are working on which restriction. And usually before submitting the formal proposal, you make this entry to the Registry of Intentions.
Okay, and so that they will be in that registry, according to you?
Yes, we will make our notification to the Registry of Intentions for our universal PFAS restriction in July, so it's coming soon. And so
yes,
that's
pre-reach then. In other words,
that's an intention.
The reach list is the one that restricts things, right?
Yes, it's before it goes into Annex 14, so it's in Annex 17. It's, I mean, the formal intention of a member state to submit a restriction proposal to the process before the process starts then formally.
Okay, very good. Ksenia, oh, sorry, you wanted to add something, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yes, fluoropolymers will be in the scope. The scope for the Registry of Intentions will be as broad as I just said, all PFAS and all users. And we still need more time to investigate derogations. So fluoropolymers will be in.
Okay, Ksenia, to you, how come the negative characteristics of PFAS are not found when developing them? Well, the cat's out of the bag, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think that's really a question for industry. I mean, according to REACH and all the European legislations, they should test for this. And we understand that, of course, fluoropolymers have not been, or polymers in general, have not been subject to be submitted under REACH, but really a responsible producer should do that. And with that said, I just want to say to Nicholas that, you know, polymer of low concern, I totally don't think that this is supported by history. If it was a polymer of low concern, we wouldn't have seen these pollution cases, right? And it's not enough just to look at the use phase. You have to look at the production phase and also which are the feedstock chemicals going in there. And they're really toxic chemicals being used to make the fluoropolymer monomers and that are turned into the polymers. And the incineration, again, here I disagree that, you know, the normal incineration in Europe will not capture some of those very potent greenhouse gases that can be formed from the fluoropolymer incinerations. So I would say that really this, with industry, they should check for the products that they're safe, not just during the use, but along the life cycle. And we hope that with the chemical strategy for sustainability, there will be much more focus on this, also on the safe and sustainable by design.
I want to get to so many more questions and I'm running out of time. I need sort of to wrap things up. And Oliver, if you can give your final thoughts about this, how safe can we be drinking water here? And where should we go with this going forward? What's the next step, do you think?
I mean, first of all, drinking water suppliers will always do everything to comply with applicable regulations to ensure that drinking water is safe. So this is, I think, something that I should state very clearly. Secondly, it is also clear that the end-of-pipe solution, thank you for drinking it, the end-of-pipe solution, so cleaning, removing PFAS in the drinking water works is not a sustainable solution, neither from a resource use point of view, energy use point of view, or cost point of view. So we must regulate the problem at the source. And I fully agree with what Ksenia said. So we need a restriction, and it should be as wide as possible, and it should ensure that PFAS are not released into the environment. This must really be the goal, even if we do not know today to what extent all of these 5,000 substances are harmless or harmful. We have to apply the precautionary principle because new knowledge comes in every year, every day, and they are so persistent. So once they are there, they stay around in the water cycle. We see that we can follow them, so they must not end up there. So I fully support a very strong restriction, banning practically all uses where we can possibly afford it, really.
Marlene, I guess, final comment, but I think, for a retailer like yourself, probably establishing a level playing field with regulation would probably help to make the shift, wouldn't it?
Yes, it will be more easier for us to supply our consumers with PFAS-free products. But we need regulation, but we also need retailers and industry and brand owners to move forward and demand PFAS-free products. And also think about, do we need a technology developed for spacecraft in ordinary consumer products? You can have a nice makeup without PFAS. You can stay warm and dry without PFAS, and then you can also cook your frying eggs without PFAS. So I think that even if technology out there, is it needed? And I think that there are alternatives. They are not more expensive. So I think we need more brand owners to also to communicate to the consumers that they are having a ban towards PFAS. So it might generate a consumer press also for PFAS-free products.
Marlene, thank you very much. Thanks to everybody. I wish we could go further. Thanks to all of the questions. Thanks for joining us on GreenWeek. I'm sorry I have to wrap this up. So thanks so much, and stay tuned for more panels during EU GreenWeek. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.